With that, I will move us to item 4 of our agenda. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Øystein Godoy. And Øystein and I have had the pleasure of working together for probably over 15 years now, mostly in international data coordination. And Dr. Godoy works for the Norwegian Meteorological Institute, but is very much engaged in global data sharing, as well as a number of projects in the European region, including the Svalbard integrated observing system, as well as the hat that he's wearing today, which is the Year of Polar Prediction. So Øystein is going to tell us to start with a bit about the sea ice and other services and observations that are part of YOPP, and then we'll focus the remainder of his talk on the actual data systems that are being established or are already established, under the YOPP program. So with that, I will ask Øystein to maybe say anything else that he'd like to say about himself, and then get into the presentation.
Thank you, Peter.
Just a reminder to do the share screen.
Yeah, just have a few comments first. I see on the attendance list now that there are a couple of people attending the meeting that probably know as much of YOPP as I do in a certain context. So please feel free to join in the discussion or with comments when I do my presentation. First of all, I know best the data component of YOPP. I'm giving a general introduction to YOPP with a focus on the data that is coming in, or the data sets that are planned. But that's not the, I don't have the full overview there, so that will be a bit more brief. So if I start, now suddenly my screen sharing, there it was. Okay, let's see. So starting with a presentation on the observations or the observation campaigns that are planned for YOPP. I've based this presentation on material that I've received from the International Coordination Office that is hosted by AVI, and especially a presentation that Kristin Werner made earlier this year. So first, some background information on the Year of Polar Prediction, although I think that many of you know quite a lot of it. It's coordinated by the World Meteorological Organization. This implies that there are a number of WMO programs and WMO activities, especially on the observation side, that is interfaced in the program. So I will come a bit back to this graphic illustration that is provided here later in the presentation. The main period for Year of Polar Prediction is mid-2017 to until mid-2019. So there was a launch May last year in Geneva. So there's still, we are now moving from the planning phase and into the implementation or the operations phase for it. And the goal of YOPP is to improve the predictions of weather and environmental conditions in the polar regions and beyond. And it's an international collaboration between academia, operational forecasting centers, and stakeholders. So it's a quite heterogeneous community. And this also places some challenges for the data management part. But I think that much of the idea behind the Year of Polar Prediction actually was started when the International Polar Year stopped. So this is more or less a sort of a continuation of the International Polar Year to a certain extent. So here's the YOPP timeline. There was a preparation phase from 2013 until mid-2017, where there was a community engagement, alignment with other planned activities, etc., development of an implementation plan, etc. So when I will start presenting the data management system later on, that was actually the reason why I got into YOPP data management was that I'm following the IPY. The WMO started the WMO Global Cryosphere Watch as a legacy of more or less of the International Polar Year. And through that, we've developed a data management system bridging between the operational and the science communities. And this was this was needed. A similar system was needed by the YOPP. So that was why we was engaged in the YOPP development as well. So we are now entering into the YOPP core phase, where we have the special observing periods with field campaigns, satellites, snapshots, etc., dedicated model experiments, and a lot of activities concerning the modeling effort. And then after this, from mid-2019 until 2022, there will be a consolidation phase, doing a lot of model experiments, but there will also be a lot of observations or field activity in that period. For those that are interested, there is a better description of this in a presentation from Thomas Jung et al. From 2016. So when YOPP is based on some special observing periods as well. So we are now close to starting the first special observing period. That is from February 1st until March 31st. This will be followed by another special observing period during the summer this year, 1st of July until September 30th. So these are special observing periods. But again, we do also have for example, the Mosaic campaign that will come later, actually in the consolidation phase of YOPP. And there are a number of other activities, field activities of YOPP that will be part of more in the consolidation phase. It's not only the Mosaic, you also have the Nansen Legacy program in Norway, where much of the activity will happen in the consolidation phase of YOPP. And then, yeah, so I focus on the Arctic now. There is also a special observing period in the Antarctic, but that's from 16th of November this year until the 15th of February next year, 2019. Yeah. So when it comes to the observations that will be collected during the campaign, this is also part of, it's quite fussy because, you know, this is a large program and there is a collaboration between research or scientific activities and operational activities. And many of the scientific activities are organized through, or most of them are organized through projects that do go through a proposal process and a funding process. So there will be an overview a bit later on the status of some of the projects that is going into this. But as it can be seen here, there is a number of observations in the Arctic. There are buoys, there are some radiosondes, there are some weather stations, etc. And there are field campaigns with icebreakers and also commercial shipping vessels. In addition, these will collect information. And some of the instruments that are deployed in this context are existing observing systems. For example, the ice-tethered platforms. There will be deployed more ice-tethered platforms, etc., funded by the projects. Some of these data goes into the GTS system of WMO. So these are basically existing observing systems that feed information digitally to the WMO global telecommunication system. And this information is fed back into the data consumers in the Arctic. And the data portal is trying to play a role bridging between the operational and the science communities in this context. The operational agencies do already have access to this information. And what will be done as well is that for many of the existing observing systems, for example, the radiosondes, there will be an increase in the number of available observations during the special observing period. So yeah, there's an increase in the number of radiosondes. There is an increase in the buoys or autonomous observing systems that are deployed. But as far as I know, there is no full overview of all the available data yet. And there is planned a number of flight operations and vessels as icebreakers, research cruises into the Arctic. So probably the major one here that is illustrated up here is the Polarstern that will be put in the transpolar drift at some point. But it also includes like the Borneo station and a number of other Borneo drift station and a number of other activities. And of course, it's complemented by the existing satellite systems. So we have the special observing period. So the core phase in the Arctic is now happening this year, as I mentioned. We have an increase in the number of satellite products that are available, extensive coverage now with the Sentinels, etc., as well in the Arctic. There will be an extensive or extension of the buoy coverage in the Arctic. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you the exact status of that because I don't have the overview of those data. So what we try to do now, much of this information will be available through the WMO GTS. So we try to extract information from the WMO GTS and put it in an archive file and make it available through the portal as well. And there is, of course, a lot of extra modeling efforts, and there is a number of YOPP datasets that have been provided by the modeling community. And of course, although we have this special observing period, there is a number of field campaigns that are running throughout the whole period. So the special observing period is probably more related to additional radiosonde launchings than actually the field campaigns in this context. And then there will be a third special observing period during the consolidation phase of YOPP that will happen in 2020 in the period of February to March. And that's coincident with the mosaic drift. So I think currently the best overview of the YOPP observations in the Arctic is actually a KML setup that has been developed by the YOPP office at AVI. So I can show that briefly afterwards. I have another browser with that. You can use that directly in the Google Earth browser. We are also working on implementing that in the YOPP data portal as a WMS client. In that, you will get an overview like this. And there is also the S here is a YOPP supersite. So there's an extensive amount of observations taken in that area. You have here icons illustrating the meteorological observations, the radio soundings, buoys, and then airborne activities. There is a color scale, like the green color is for the activities that are already planned and scheduled for the special observing period. The magenta is activities that are under consideration or yet not fully funded. It could be like that. So I already noticed a couple of modifications that should be made to this illustration, because that is activities that I know have received funding since this was actually created. So this illustration was the most recent version I have that you also can access through the through the link that is available at the bottom here. That is from early January this year. And then there are also some continuous activities, especially on the weather stations, the synoptic weather stations of WMO. There are existing buoy programs and also existing radio soundings that are available that will run no matter whether there is a special observing period or not. So when it comes to the YOPP endorsed projects, initiatives, etc., this is an update as of 12th of January. And there is a combination of programs in the atmosphere, in the ocean, and this is all in the Arctic. And there is some modeling activities in between atmosphere and ocean. Then you have a lot of activities in the Antarctic as well, and most of the activity in the Antarctic so far is focusing on the atmosphere. There are only a few activities in the ocean. Around these illustrations, you have like this project, Samika. When it doesn't have a solid circle around it, then there is no funding yet for the project. But like Aspire, there is currently funding, and like for this H2O DC, it's only partly funded so far, and this also affects the availability of the observations in the YOPP presentations. So this is sort of the same approach as the International Polar Year. There's a lot of activities, there is a lot of projects that are endorsed, but the mechanism to actually integrate and get a full overview of the observing activities is a bit difficult currently. And there is also at the bottom here some institutional endorsements of the activities. Yeah. And then there is the concept of YOPP super sites and verification sites. So these are sites that will be used extensively in the evaluation of the modeling capacity. So there is currently a lot of discussion. These sites have extensive observational campaigns, and there is a discussion now on how to extract the modeling output and collocate that with the observations of these stations. There is also further information on this in the link at the bottom. Then there is just a brief list of some of the operational centers that offer their support for the YOPP endorsed campaigns. It's also a list at the bottom here. So I guess these centers can then also help the science community integrating observations into the WMO GTS, if so. Then you have modeling and forecasting datasets of YOPP. So the ECMWF is launching a YOPP dataset. It's an EPS controlled forecast of 18 kilometers resolution. There's a coupled model from the autumn. And this dataset is linked, also you can access the dataset through the link there. It's also available through the YOPP data portal today. Furthermore, the Environment Canada is also preparing a number of YOPP datasets. So there's a list of datasets that they are, modeling datasets that they are providing here. And there's, this data is yet not fully integrated in the YOPP data portal. So some of the challenges when we are developing now the YOPP is, and this is the experience from the YOPP office at AVI, it's to get firm commitments for the special observing periods. It's also how to work with the YOPP satellite component. And of course, the YOPP data portal. How do we make sure that data is made available in the YOPP data portal? So I will come back to the YOPP data portal after this presentation. I just think that I should share another screen. And I hope that this works as well. So Peter, are you able to see the Google Earth presentation now?
We can, yes, thank you.
So this is the KML that has been provided by the YOPP office, and here you have an overview of the existing activities that I showed a static image of earlier. So you can go and you can get some information on the various stations. So for Danmarkshavn, this is additional an increase in the radio soundings, and this is all already funded and now being launched on the 1st of February. There are a number of other activities, some funded. For example, there's an airplane campaign using the Polar 5 of AVI in the so next year. That is already funded and planned. I saw that there was some information here. For example, this is an activity under consideration as at Hopen with an additional synoptic measurements of the weather. So this is already existing, and this is actually a manned station. So there is already data flowing in from this site. So some of the color codes here are not necessarily fully updated. There is also, as I mentioned earlier, I saw that you have this Nansen Legacy project of Norway, doing a lot of measurements with a new icebreaker in Norway, going into the ice around Svalbard. That is funded now, but it's not in this map. I think there were some radio soundings. If I don't, no, that was not it. It was. So this is, for example, some of the observations from that icebreaker where you will have additional radio sounds during the period. So this will be partly covering the special observing periods, and it will partly be outside the special observing periods. And of course, hidden behind all the buoys up here, this is just a cluster of buoys that will be, I think it's representing a number of buoys that will be deployed in the Arctic from the polar stand that is available. So the ship is actually hidden behind all the buoys here. So this you can actually go in and play with on your own and have a look at the available information. And as far as I know, there is continuous activity at the YOPP office in order to update this overview and add new activities to it. So that more or less completes what I intended to say on the campaigns. I'm sorry I don't have any more details on all the specifics of the CIs, etc. And I don't know which of the projects that actually have committed or have funding to deploy additional ITPs or things like that. I know that some of the cruises that go into the ice, for example, the Legacy with the new Norwegian icebreaker, will do a lot of ice observations in the, but that's basically in the area around Svalbard, especially focusing on the area east of Svalbard and towards Franz Josef Land. So before I start on the presentation of the data part, do you want me to answer questions now, or do you want to take questions after the presentation of data as well?
I would suggest we see if there are any questions right now, just while it's fresh in our minds. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, I had a quick question. You mentioned challenges with satellite data or remote sensing. Could you speak more to that? Like, what are the main challenges there?
So I'm actually not quite sure. I think it's more on the getting the overview of what is available of existing products and data that can be used for for the YOPP activities.
Okay.
So, you know, it's not like building a new satellite and launching it. But
Yeah.
I think it's also part of influencing the, for example, the coverage of SAR, and sort of having the SAR observations available in the areas where with the mode that is actually needed by the community. But
Right.
I'm not sure on the status on that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
This is Gopani. I'm wondering, the icebreaker data would only be available for the special period, or it's going to be year-round?
So Mosaic, that's the main campaign. That's the polar stand when that freezes in. So that there will be a long-term production of data from that, both from the ship, from sensors surrounding the ship, and there will be buoys deployed in the area around the ship, a quite wide area, as far as I understand. When it comes to some of the other icebreakers, I'm not sure of all of them. You have like some Russian icebreakers that are under consideration that is yet not funded. I guess those will be more or less in the same area as the Norwegian icebreaker. It will be campaigns. And I think it will be accidentally, more or less, overlapping with the special observing periods. There will be a number of campaigns or cruises throughout the YOPP period. Whether that actually overlaps with the special observing campaigns or not, that I'm not sure on all the details. I think some of the Kronprins Haakon cruises will overlap and some will not.
Okay, thank you.
But you also have this, and it's still listed as a activity under consideration. That's the Borneo ice camp, the Russian ice camp. So that's also more continuous production of data from that. But again, as in this context, I think it's like IPY. You have a number of projects that will produce data. You have, in principle, a free and open sharing of data. It will be quite interesting to see how the data flow actually materializes once the projects start running and producing data. So the buoys or the automatic, the instrumentation that provides continuous measurements, I think it's the least problem, at least those that communicates directly with some central system through Argos or Iridium. But the other ones, I'm a bit more uncertain on the status for.
Okay.
Thank you, Øystein. I think in the interest of time, I'll ask you to move on to the next presentation. We have about 20 minutes total in the slot left, but we wanted to leave a bit of time for questions. So.
Yeah. So now, apparently, my screen froze.
Oh no.
And I'm not sure how to recover from this. Ah, there it came.
Okay.
So then I will try again. And I will share another screen. So this one I know a bit better. So that's the YOPP data management, and that's pretty much based on the WMO Global Cryosphere Watch data management, which in turn is based on the IPY data management, or the IPY data and information service that Mark Parsons, etc., built up. So we have many of the data centers from that period is also contributing here. So the purpose of the YOPP data portal is to provide an overview of data sets that are relevant to GCW. That's not correct. It should say YOPP there, but that's reuse of slides. And it shall both cover real-time data sets and archived data. It's quite important in this context that YOPP is a WMO program, and WMO started to develop during the International Polar Year WMO information system. Part of WMO information system is the WMO Global Telecommunication Service. That's the real-time exchange of weather observation, and oceanographic and hydrologic observation globally. So the sorry, the portal will try to both interface with the archive, the long time series that are available, and the real-time data streams. One of the things that we try to do in this context, if you look at the data portal over here, you have the WMO GTS system, and there is a lot of real-time information flowing around there. This information is available to the operational centers, but it's not available to the science community. So part of the task that we've done now is that we are extracting for the Arctic all available information from the GTS system. The information there is circulated in using buffer, also WMO buffer, and a format that is pretty close to encryption. We take that information and we put it in NetCDF climate and forecast files and put it on an OpenDAP server. That is already being done or done, so that's available, but it's not indexed in the YOPP data portal yet. So we are now working on the discovery metadata for the synoptic weather stations and the radio sound stations that are available in the Arctic. That is only the stations that are in the GTS system flagged as essential or free and open data. So there may be other information circulated in GTS, but it's not free and open, and then we can actually extract it, but we are not allowed to publish it externally again. The basic approach of the YOPP data portal is to, it's a physically distributed system. So you have the data portal in the middle, but basically this is not hosting data. Data are hosted by data centers like the Norwegian Meteorological Institute, the Polar Institute of Japan, ECMWF, Pangea in Germany, or NOAA, or Environment Canada. In order to achieve this integration, we started off with the International Polar Year approach using GCMD-DIF and the Open Archive Initiative for Protocol for Metadata Harvesting. So we have linkages with most of these data sets, either using OAI PMH, or they actually send us the relevant discovery metadata and we ingest it. This is, for example, how we do it with ECMWF currently. So these data are not available in a standardized interface. It's using the interfaces that ECMWF is providing for their data. It's also worth mentioning that Pangea is a major data repository for YOPP, and as far as I know, all the information from the Mosaic experiment shall go into Pangea. So we have now set up a way of identifying the YOPP relevant data in Pangea. So whenever people upload the data they have to Pangea, they have to insert YOPP in a label field when they upload data. Then we can harvest that information directly from Pangea. Otherwise, these data sets will be hidden in the huge collection of information that Pangea provides. For the YOPP data management, in order to simplify the interaction between observations and modeling community, we recommend that people use NetCDF, the Climate and Forecast Convention, for the data. And we also do recommend that people add the attribute convention for dataset discovery to the datasets. So then you have both the use metadata and the discovery metadata readily available in the datasets. What we are looking into now, we have already created a way of putting buffer data into NetCDF CF. We are now looking at a way for observations when we have time series of NetCDF Climate and Forecast Convention encoded data for observation sites, time series. Then we can put data into buffer, and if necessary, we can then put these data into the WMO GTS. This would be very beneficial for a number of the continuous measurements that is done by the science community as well. For some observation systems that the science community is using, this is already handled. For example, the ice-tethered platforms, that's handled. So the challenges we face on the data management part of YOPP, it's the usual challenges. You have a heterogeneous system of data centers contributing. Whether these data centers actually apply interoperability protocols vary quite much. So we have some data centers that are moving quite fast in harmonization at the, also all data centers offer more or less now, I think, standardized discovery metadata. The problem is at the data level. So there is a number of data centers that have their own way of handling the data encoding, and they are also using non-standardized interoperability protocols for data. The granularity of the discovery metadata is less of a problem in YOPP compared to some of the other projects. But the main challenge on metadata granularity will be for the observational data. It's also the problem of terminology and semantics, and that comes back to the standardization at the data level. Also, how do we encode the data? So that's why we try to circumvent this problem by recommending the NetCDF CF for the encoding of data. So this is some of the services that we set up for the YOPP data portal. There are human interfaces through the YOPP as a data portal interface, where you can do a manual data discovery. There are machine interfaces for harvesting discovery metadata and also for accessing the data or visualizing the data. When it comes to data discovery, I mentioned we are using OAI PMH, either ISO 19115 or GCMD diff. So both these are consumed by the system. We are also able to consume OpenSearch or OGC CSW, but we have not been able to test that extensively yet. When it comes to data access, in order to simplify it, create a cost-efficient system, we are, as many other such distributed systems, recommending OpenDAP. And if OpenDAP is available for the data sets, we can actually add a number of services on top of the data, special data transformation services. So if there is OpenDAP access to the data and the data is encoded according to NetCDF CF, we can do data subsetting. Data, for example, for model data, you can do a subsetting in the variable space, in the geographic space, or in the time space. And we can also do a reprojection of the data into a different map projection if that is required. Of course, there is a lot of different models out there. So we haven't been able to test our transformation services on all the available data. This is something that we need to work on when we get access to the data through the interfaces as well. But at least the most common formats that's, or forms that's supported now. We also try to use OpenDAP for visualization of time series at stations. For gridded data, we use the OGC WMS if that's available for data for visualization of the products. Yeah, so much of the activity we have in the data portal is based around this OpenDAP protocol and the common data model. So we have a mapping into a generic data model, which simplifies integration of data. So the status is that the website is up and running. The functionality is a search system based on Solar. Facet support is partially implemented. As today, you can download single products as is provided by the data provider. You can bundle products into a zip file using the basket in the system. The problem is that some of the metadata points not to a physical file, but to a service, a web interface for actually downloading the data. This is, for example, the situation for the YOPP dataset served by ECMWF. So in that context, we cannot do anything. The user has to go through the interface of ECMWF in order to download. Select the data I want and download it. But the data from ECMWF is freely available in this context. So we have a number of visualization services that we want to implement. Some of them are implemented but not activated in the system yet. It's visualization of gridded data that is actually working. So we will activate that. It's actually already implemented, but it's not activated for the data sets in the portal. So time series, we need to re-implement that. And one of the reasons for that was that we discovered that some of the data are of a minute resolution. So we had a scaling issue on the visualization service that we built. We need to re-implement that. But this works for example, climate indicators and things like that. But that's not necessarily the main focus under the YOPP. And we want to add an issue tracker to the site in order to improve the communication with the user community and to help people contributing data and using the data that is available. We are looking into integration towards GTS in order to bridge between the science community and the operational community. So we have already, as I mentioned, dumped SynOp and TEMP data to NetCDF-CF that is served through OpenDAP, but we are missing discovery metadata, and we are working on that now. We're looking into ingestion of ITP and also the IMDD data into the system. So we have already a system for extracting data from Woodsole and converting these data into NetCDF-CF profile data. And the reason why we would like to do this is to simplify the integration of these data with the other data. There is a guidance documentation under development, and hopefully that will be released next week or so. So this is basically how it looks as of now. That's the human interface. That's the address of the portal. There is not much data in there currently. It's primarily some data sets from the Norwegian Meteorological Institute and some and the ECMWF YOPP data set that is available in there. Basically what you're able to do, so the next update of this system will look a bit different. Then you will have, in addition to the transform button, you will have a visualize button. So there will be a direct download of the full file and then transform for a selection of data, parameters from a data set, as long as it's served using OpenDAP. And then there is this visualization service as well. This is part of the transformation service that is offered. So this is an example where we work on sea ice concentration from satellite that is available in the system, and that's basically you have to provide an email address. This is an asynchronous job where you can select the data that you want, the operation that you want to put on the data, the subset of the spatial extent, temporal extent, and then the variables that you want. You can change the map projection, you can send a request, and then you will get an email with a link to the data once it's available or finished. And this is the WMS service that we've set up. So as long as data centers provide a WMS service for the data set they are providing, it can be visualized here. So this is output from the Arum Arctic model operated by the Norwegian Meteorological Institute. This is the air temperature at the surface. As you can see, currently there is only a time slider, so you can have the a time slider back and forth in the data set. And we have not been able to add the selection of the vertical layer in the model yet. This system works as it is now for surface fields of the atmospheric models and the ocean models.
So Øystein, we have about 5 minutes or so left, so I'm just wondering if you could sort of come to an end and we can have a few minutes for questions. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. So the recommendations, this is NetCDF. We want people to encode data as NetCDF, Climate and Forecast Convention, wherever possible. Version 1.6 or higher, data access using OpenDAP, wherever possible. because that allows data streaming, and then we can do a direct get of using HTTP. But if you use HTTP, we need more discovery metadata. So for example, if you have a data set that is not aggregated across the physical files using OpenDepth, then you need discovery metadata per the physical file. And then of course, discovery metadata using diff or ISO. So I think that's just some brief plans. We do a number of updates during the first half of 2018, and the last things we hope will be in place during the autumn. And I think that was it. Okay.
Excellent for both talks. And we have a few minutes left, so I just want to open up the floor to any questions that we might have.
Dave Bailey here. I have some questions about the NetCDF sort of recommendation. One of the issues we've seen in the past is that for the observers who are collecting the data, putting the burden of converting to NetCDF and CF conventions and metadata and all of that can be a big challenge. Have you been thinking about standard tools for them? Are you going to do this manually? I just wondered what your approach was to this.
So this is part of the problem in the context that we do not have direct access to the community that is doing the observations. So first of all, our recommendation is that actually you convert the way that you put in the data as early as possible. So that's just to do that as simple as possible. What we have done is that we have implemented a version of it's UCAR's Rosetta, no, Unidata's Rosetta, the tool in order to convert from ASCII files or comma-separated files into a NetCDF CF. But you need a template for those data. So we have been looking at offering a service like that to the community through the portal. That's not available. We have a test version, but we haven't been able to launch it fully yet. Another thing, and that's in the context of GCW. In the GCW program or activity, we are actually developing a software which can take information from the data loggers, for example, the campus scientific data logger, and put it into NetCDF data. So you can get at least your instrumental data into NetCDF quite easy from that perspective. There is also an activity within GCW trying to influence the standardization effort of WMO towards the instrument manufacturers, so that they actually include this in the new loggers. But that won't help us now. So I think for now it will be the Rosetta service where you can upload data, or this software from GCW that can actually read some of the existing loggers and convert it on the fly to NetCDF. During that conversion, that is also doing a quality control of the parameters. And this system will be demonstrated in Davos during the Polar 2018. So hopefully we have a version of that software that is available for the user community by the summer.
Thank you, Øystein. That brings us to our hour, and so we try to finish up on time. What I might suggest is that if you're interested in learning more about the YOPP program or the YOPP data services, Øystein's contact information, this presentation, etc., will all be posted to the IARPA Collaborations website. And so please feel free to reach out directly, or ideally actually post a comment to the event for this particular talk and on the IARPA site, and we can all have a conversation around it.